Hey guys, welcome back to our videos. Today we are looking at domain and range for this lesson. For domain, for your vocabulary, these are all your possible input values. These are going to be your x values. So when you're looking at your graph, you're going to look at your x-axis for these. We always look at x values from left to right. That's least to greatest on your graph. For range, that's all your possible output values. Those are your y values. That's just another name for y. These we're going to read from bottom to top. That's how you read least to greatest on y values. Start at the bottom, go to the top. So when we're looking at domain and range, a lot of times your first question is going to be, is it a function? As y'all learned in the last lesson, a function has to pass that vertical line test. So if I were to draw a line anywhere on this graph, does it hit the line more than once? Well, every single one of these lines only hits it one time, so this is a function. So we'll just put yes. For x-intercepts, you want to look where those cross the x-axis. So on that x-axis, it only hits one time. It's going to be a decimal, so we're just going to estimate it about 2.8. If you want to put 2.7 or 2.9, that's fine. I'm going to estimate 2.8. For x-intercepts, those are going to be your number first, then 0. So this is going to be 2.8, 0. Make sure you put those parentheses around it. For your y-intercept, that's going to be the opposite. You're going to put 0 first, then you're going to put your number. So on the y-axis, it hits right up here. And that, it doesn't show the line because it's covering it, but that is actually 3. So we're going to put our 0 first, and then we're going to put 3. And again, make sure you get those parentheses. Is there a max or min? For max or min, you're looking at the top or the bottom of your graph. Is there a top point? Is there a bottom point? At the very top of our graph, we have this point up here. Same as our y-intercept, so that is your maximum because it's at the top. For max and mins, we write them as y equals. So that y equals right there. Again, you can't see the line because it got covered up by the curve, but that was 3. For the bottom, this one right here, this is your minimum value. It's the lowest point on your graph. So for your min, we have y equals, and if we drag it across, that's going to be -1. Okay, if you remember back to lesson 2.1, for this first and last value for x we're going to go from left to right. So what's your first value on the left? On the left, that point right there hits at -2. So that's my first value. For my last value, I'm going to go all the way to the right, and that one hits at 4. For y, we look at the same thing, the first and last value, but we're going to go bottom to top. At the very bottom, if we drag it across, that one hits at -1. And at the very top, a lot of people go to this point right here. This is not the very top. You want to go to the top of that curve. That top curve is going to be at 3. So you just look for the left and right on x, top and bottom on y. Okay. Then also from 2.1, we learned how to look at certain intervals to tell if it was an increase or a decrease. So if I look at the interval that starts at -2, so we're going to start right here, and we're going to stop at -0.5. We always go left to right. So if I start on the left and follow my graph, it's going up. So that's going to be an increase. And then if we start at 0.5 and we go to 3.5, left to right as always. If I follow the curve there, that one's going to be a decrease. Okay, so we're going to use quite a bit of that to do domain and range. That was just our review. For domain and range, again, domain is going to be your x values, and range is going to be your y values. So for x, we're going to do what we did on that graph at the top. We're going to start with the first value, and we're going to start on the left. We always start on the left. So the first value on the left is going to be -2. The last value, we're going to go to the other side. We're going to go to the right, and that one's going to fall at 4. So for domain down here, it starts at -2, it stops at 4. In the middle, we're going to put x because domain is our x values. Between those numbers and the x, we're always going to put inequalities. These are always, always, always going to be less than symbols. And then we have to decide if they're equal to. If you remember inequalities, equal to symbols, whether it's greater than or less than, those are the ones with the closed circles. Not equal to, just less than or greater than, those are going to be open circles. So on -2, I had a closed circle, so I'm going to put equal to. On 4, I have a closed circle, so I'm going to put equal to. So that's how we write domain. We get our first value, our last value. Domain is x, so I put x in the middle. We always use less than symbols. And then you just have to decide, is it open circles or closed circles? If it's closed, put a line. If it's open, don't. Okay, for range, we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to start at the bottom. So at the bottom, the very bottom point, I'm going to drag it over to the y-axis. That one hits at -1. The last value is going to be at the top. Again, you have to go to the very top. Don't stop at that point. Go to the very top of your graph. That one hits your y-axis at 3. So when we write our range, we're going to start with -1. We're going to stop with 3. It's range, so that's our y values. So we put y in the middle. We're always, always, always going to use less than every time. If they're open circles, they get no equal to bar. If they're closed circles, we put an equal to bar. So down there at the bottom, that -1, that's a closed circle. So we're going to put an equal to bar. At the top, we don't have a circle. When you don't have a circle, you're going to put an equal to bar. If they wanted that to be open, they will literally show an open circle right here. If you see nothing, that means it's closed, and you need to put an equal to bar. The only time you leave that line off is if there is an open circle. Okay, let's try the next part. So the top of this is just reviewing kind of what I said before. We're going to find the first and last value. We're going to put those on the left and right like we did on the last page where we had, like for domain, we put -2 on the front, 4 on the end. And then if it's domain, you're going to put x there. If it's range, you're going to put y in the middle. Then we're going to use the chart to plug it in. This chart down here for domain and range is going to show you what to do for what numbers you get. It'll show you what to do if you get arrows. It'll show you what to do for every different scenario you could possibly see. So you're going to look at the chart and then you're going to move across to see if you need to change anything. So like I said, we're going to read from negative to positive. We're going to go left to right or bottom to top, depending on if you're looking at domain or range. And your inequality symbols are always less than. Open circles are just less than. Closed circles are less than or equal to. If your graph goes off the grid, like some of the parabolas that we saw in lesson 2.1, where they just kind of go off, that means they're going to get arrows. Those are going to be infinity symbols. However, infinity symbols are not allowed to be put in domain and range. So this chart down here is going to tell us what to do with those infinity symbols. So when we have domain, it works the same for domain and range. So you can look at either chart. So for domain, if we have arrows on both sides, if we have an arrow on the left and the right, we're going to have infinity is less than x is less than infinity. However, we cannot have infinity symbols. So we have to cross them both out. That's what this middle part is. Cross out both of them. For your final answer, all you're going to have left is x. If there were infinity symbols on both sides, that means x is all real numbers. How we write that is this little fancy R. For you to write it by hand, you're just going to put like 2 lines and put an R. So, or you can draw an R and put a line through it. Either way works. When you're typing it into the computer, you're literally just going to type in R. You're going to put x equals R. So that's all you'll have to put in the computer. If you have no arrows, you have points on both sides like we did on the first page. You have a number on one side, number on the other. That's just staying the same. You don't cross anything out. You leave it exactly like you see it. The only things you will ever cross out are your infinity symbols. If you only have an arrow on one side, like for this one it's the left side, for the bottom this would be an arrow on the right side. We're going to write it with the infinity symbol first, then we'll cross it out because we can't have that. Then you're just left with x is less than a number, like x is less than, let's go 2. That we're going to leave alone. If it's flipped around and we have 2 is less than x, and we have to get rid of that infinity symbol, x always has to go first. In any inequality that you're ever going to have, you have to make sure your x is first. Otherwise, it's going to be wrong. So if your x is not first, we're going to have to flip everything around, including the inequality symbol. So x will go first, 2 will go last, and we'll flip that inequality symbol. This is the only time you ever get to put greater than. Only if you had to get rid of an infinity symbol at the end. Every other domain and range you will ever see, you're going to have less than, no matter where it is. This is the only time we get greater than. Works the same way for y as we did up here. Cross out your infinities if you have 2 of them and put y equals all real numbers or y equals r. If you have 2 numbers, leave it alone. If you have one inequality symbol, we cross them out. As long as y is first, we get to leave it alone. So those we get to leave alone. If y is not first, we have to reverse it. So if that was 2 is less than y, we have to reverse it and put y is greater than 2. That's the only time we mess with it. So let's try one. So on A, our first x. For x, we're going to go left to right. So for the first x on the left, it hits right here. That is going to be -3. On the right, this point over here, the very right point, I'm going to drag it up to my x so I know where I'm hitting it. It's hitting at 1. So no infinities, no arrows, no none of that. So we're going to plug in from our chart at the top. We plug in our number on the left that we start with, our number on the right that we end with, and we always use less than symbols. So -3 is where it started, 1 is where it ends. X in the middle because it's domain. Domain always gets X. Always use your less than symbols. Then we have to decide, is it an open circle or a closed circle? Over here on -3, that's an open circle. So that just stays less than. On 1, that one's closed. So we're going to put an equal to bar. It doesn't have to be equal to for both. It can be 1 sometimes and only 1. The domain part, that's where you cross stuff out. If you have infinities, we're going to cross them out. We don't have any infinities, so we just bring it straight down. Don't change anything about it. Okay, for y, we're going to look from bottom to top. Always start on the negative side, go to the top. At the bottom, we have these 2 points. We have a point over here on the right, and we have this curve over here on the left. It doesn't matter which one you choose. They are both hitting at -4. So that's the bottom piece. At the top, same thing. We have a point on the left, we have a curve on the right. But it doesn't matter because they're both hitting at 0. That's the origin right there, 0. And then we plug it in. We put our first number, we put our last number. In the middle, This is range, so we're going to put y. We always, always, always use less than symbols. The last thing we have to decide is, are they equal to? For -4 down here, we have a closed circle on that curve. Again, unless you see an open piece, it's always closed. So those are both closed, so we put an equal to symbol. For 0 at the top, we have an open circle and we have a closed piece right here. Anytime you get a mixture of them, your closed piece is always going to overrule everything else. The closed piece wins, so we put an equal to bar. If you ever see a closed piece, ignore the open one, go with the closed one. The range part, do we need to cancel anything out? Were there infinities that we're not allowed to have? No. All of it's numbers, so we just bring it straight down. Nothing to cancel out here. Okay, on B, starting with domain, starting with our first x value, we're always going to go left to right. On the left, the very left point, we have -4. On the very right, all the way over here, we have an arrow. Arrows are going to be infinity. And then we just plug it in. We put our first term, we put our last term. It's domain, so we're going to put x in the middle. And we always use less than symbols. For -4, let me erase this real quick so we can see it. For -4, we have a closed circle. Closed circles are going to get equal to bars. For infinity, we can't reach infinity. You can keep counting and counting and counting, but you're never going to reach infinity. Because you can't actually touch it, we can never be equal to it because it's going to go forever. Those are never going to get an equal to bar. And then for our domain, we have to decide, do we cancel anything out? Well, we can't have infinities, so those have to go away. And then x has to be first. Because this is backward, we have to flip everything, including our inequality sign. So x goes first, -4 last, and instead of less than or equal to, we're going to put greater than or equal to. Again, that's the only time you get to use greater than. Only when you have to flip it around. Okay, for y, we're going to look from bottom to top. So start at the bottom for your first term and go to the top. At the very bottom, not the point, the very bottom, that's going to hit our line at -3. At the very top, again, not the point, the very top, we have an arrow. Arrows are infinity. They're going to go forever. Then we plug it in. -3 was our first term. Infinity was our last y. It's range, so we're going to put y in the middle. We always use less than symbols. -3 down here, that little curve, there's no open piece, so it's going to be equal to. And infinity, again, we can't reach infinity, so we leave that alone. However, when we write our range, we can't use infinity, so we have to take it out. Our y is backward, so we're going to have to flip it around, just like we did at the top. That includes our inequality. So y first, -3 last, and instead of less than or equal to, we're going to flip it to greater than or equal to. Okay, let's try C. For C, starting with domain as always, first x value, we're going to start on the left. For the last, we're going to the right. So on the left, the very, very left over here, we have arrows. Arrows are going to be infinity. On the right, the super right side over here, that one's going to hit at 15. So when we plug it in, our first x is infinity, our last x is 15. It's domain, so we put x in the middle, and we always use less than symbols. Like I said on the last problem, we can't reach infinity, so we don't worry about that inequality. It stays. But 15, there's no open circle. So that's going to get an equal to bar. So for our final answer, what do we have to cross out? We cannot have infinity, so that has to go away, including the inequality symbol. And then we just bring down the rest because x is already first. So x is less than or equal to 15. Then we're going to go to range. For range, our first value at the bottom, the super bottom, that one has an arrow. Arrows mean what? Arrows are infinity. The last y at the very top, not where it hits the y-axis, but the very, very top, that's an arrow as well. So that's infinity. So when we plug it in, we got infinity for first, infinity for last, y in the middle because it's range, and we always use less than symbols. Are they equal to? Well, they're both arrows. We can't reach infinity, so we can never be equal to it. So no equal to's. However, when we write our range, we can't use those infinity symbols. So because it goes forever, on the bottom it went to infinity, on the top it went to infinity. Because it goes forever, that's going to include every number we could ever think of. That's going to include all real numbers. How we write that is y equals all real numbers with an R with a line through it. So write an R with a line. When you're typing it into the computer, you're just going to put y equals R because they don't have an all real number symbol. And the last one, we're going to start with domain as always. Start from left and stop on the right. On the left, what's the very, very left number? We don't care about this point right here. The left is going to be your arrow. That means infinity. The last thing on the right, again, not caring about the point, arrows are going to overrule everything. So go with the arrow. That's infinity. So then we plug it in. Infinity for first, infinity for last, and then this is domain, so we're going to put x in the middle. We always use less than symbols. And then we can't reach infinity, so we don't have to worry about equal to. We're never going to be equal to infinity because it goes forever. When we write our domain, though, what do we have to cancel out? Well, we can't use infinity. That's not something we're allowed to do. So we just have x left over. Because it's infinity on both sides, x is going to equal all real numbers. So you can draw the R with a line through it, or in your computer, just type x equals R. Make sure your x is first. Last, we're going to look at range for this one. We're going to start at the bottom, and we're going to go to the top. So for our first value at the bottom, we have these two little points right here on the left and right. Both of those hit your y-axis where? Well, this is the origin right here, so both of them hit at 0. For the last y at the top, you do have this little curve up here, but I said it in passing on the other problem, your arrows are going to overrule everything. These arrows don't stop. They're going to keep going and going and going and going and going. And they're going to eventually pass that curve. So they're going to keep going. So we always have to go with the arrows, no matter what. So at the top, we're going to have infinity because it's going to go forever. Ignore the curve. So plug it in. Your first number is 0. Last is infinity. This is range, so we're going to put y in the middle. And we always use less than symbols. For 0, let me erase this so we can see. For 0, these are all closed. We don't have a single open circle there, so it's going to be equal to. It's all closed. For infinity, we can't reach that. We can never be equal to infinity to those arrows. so that we just leave alone. When we write it for our range, what do we have to get rid of? What can we not have? We can never have infinity in our answer. However, what else is wrong with our inequality now? Now that we've gotten rid of infinity, y is at the end. Y has to be first. So we have to flip it around, including your inequality symbol. So y first, 0 last, and flip your inequality symbol because we flipped our numbers. So it's going to be y is greater than or equal to 0. Okay, that's all the example problems. That'll give you an example for every single one of your practice problems. So go through your practice problems and try those.